India aspires to become a developed country by 2047. The foundations for a developed country would be set in science and technology, and a lot of that would have to be indigenously developed. I have with me Professor Umesh Waghmare. He's an engineer by training from IIT Bombay, turned a scientist, and works at the Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research in Bangalore, and is currently the president of the Indian Academy of Sciences, a well-respected academy of India. Professor Waghmare, in your opinion, what is the state of Indian science today?
In most areas of contemporary importance or emerging areas, we are below subcritical mass. And this is true not only in basic sciences, but also applied sciences, and even more so in engineering.
Subcritical meaning?
We don't have enough number of people working in the country in a given area where collective thinking can make a big impact. Everyone is sort of individually working, excelling well within their capacity, but the effect that a collection can have in sort of identifying the best possible directions in most interesting, ambitious problems, that doesn't get facilitated when the size is small.
A lot of science is driven by individual work and individual passion. So why should numbers matter?
Well, the individual excellence is absolutely possible in particularly theory, certain areas of theoretical sciences. But even there, I would say excellence is very rare on the global scale. Within India, we do see many people doing outstanding work, but if you want to compare with the best in the world, I wouldn't really say. And that difference goes, the gap between that increases even for a given individual, because we stay here and the ecosystem is different, work culture is different, the students we get to work with are different from what the most developed countries get. So that individual excellence remains for some time, but unless there is an ecosystem which is very strong to support sort of long-lasting excellence, I don't think.
Let's turn our attention to a point when India was living literally hand to mouth on food. We had no food grain available. We were living ship to mouth. Don't you think the Indian scientific community contributed in a very big way in making India self-sufficient in food and now making India a food surplus country?
Absolutely. Yes, food in terms of both green revolution as well as the milk revolution. They both involved scientific advances and ingenious development. More importantly, I think the medical field, the clinical practices, expertise that is required for lots of technical jobs in medical as well as small-scale engineering are supported by the education in science and technology. ISRO is another big example where the workforce is mostly trained in India, and science and technology definitely has made a huge impact there. Atomic energy is another very important area, other than food security.
Now, do you think we've reached a point where we don't need to worry about the basic necessities, and hence we are looking at more fundamental breakthroughs in science coming from India? Is that a change of perception?
No, I don't think that is true. My impression is India has to keep investing and growing its investment in fundamental science as well as applied science and all aspects of science and technology. The reason again goes back to the fact that we are below critical mass. And we do not have a luxury to pick only fundamental science now and ignore applied, or vice versa. So it's really important that we maintain the commitment, and country has to maintain the commitment to pump in enough funds at various levels in different types of field, respecting that certain fields will give returns at a later time and certain we can expect even a shorter time scale.
So, do you think the efforts which are being made by different governments? See, in my opinion, who is somebody who has reported science and technology, there is bipartisan support to science. Whichever flavor comes in, there is support for science. Do you concur?
Absolutely. Yeah. See, the level of funding hasn't changed discontinuously any time when the governments changed. Few things which did change is, I think, new programs or new initiatives get introduced without allocating additional funds for it. And that leads to a bit imbalance, because ongoing or older activities also need to be funded, and they shouldn't be sort of compromised at the cost of new initiatives. So some management definitely changes from one government to another, but overall level of funding hasn't really gone down.
Now, let's look at today. There are several new things which have come up, and one of the initiatives from the government was this Anusandhan National Research Foundation. As somebody who heads a large academy, which is a body of scientists, and you represent a certain understanding, is the Anusandhan National Research Foundation a step in the right direction?
Absolutely, to the level I understand. Okay, one important objective of the Anusandhan National Research Foundation is to uplift the state universities and colleges in terms of integrating research with their education in a stronger manner, as recommended by the National Education Policy 2020. So indeed, ANRF is in line with the great objective of the National Education Policy. But there are two issues I wish to say. That the original concept of ANRF had a great deal of autonomy structured in it at the base, the foundation. And that I don't quite see being protected anymore. And the second is the allocation for universities and the mode of operation hasn't also been spelled out very clearly. But I think we shouldn't be impatient, we should wait for those. From academy side, what we have done is we have met both Professor Karandikar and Professor Sood, who is the PSA, and offered that academy will be happy to work on interfacing with universities. You know, the fellowship of the academy are all eminent established scientists, and they could serve as mentors to the junior researchers in the universities, where funding alone is not enough. You know, helping them in developing good ideas, good proposals, and then mentoring them while executing the projects is something which academy can take up. Just like we have science education program where we interface with students, undergraduate students, also teachers in colleges, we train teachers, refresher courses and so on. We, I think, can play a very big role in achieving this objective, and I'm in dialogue with them. Autonomy is one part I do wish to highlight, because given that our funds are short in relative sense and our number of people need to grow rapidly, I think the autonomy is very critical in efficient usage of whatever funds are allocated. And that I'm a little bit disappointed with the ANRF.
Meaning, see, right now the interim CEO in Dr. Abhay Karandikar, Secretary, Department of Science and Technology, has been announced for the ANRF. So where do you see more autonomy that is needed?
The autonomy is needed at various levels, I would say. The point is, you know, the funding should be given to ANRF, And then the way it is utilized at micro level, let's say through a project or through some fellowships or through some support to human resources, shouldn't be micro controlled, is my view. There should be great deal of flexibility and autonomy in the utilization of it. I don't think DST office or Professor Karandika's role here is going to compromise any of this, but the structure of ANRF needs to permit that. If every little thing is subject to audit, and then it means lot of time is required in essentially purchasing things or conforming to certain rules. I think they cannot use the same rules to buy scientific equipment that they would use to buy stationery for a government office or printers for a government office. And that's unfortunately what is happening. The rules applicable to electricity department or water supply department can't be used for processes, various processes, administrative or otherwise, which are required to achieve cutting-edge science and technology.
You mean to say there is more bureaucratic hurdles or red tapeism which comes into procurement and it delays getting the right equipment or hiring the right person?
Absolutely. Yes, yes. So I must say that about 10 years ago, things were much easier, I must say. Now there is a new platform called Government E-Marketing, GEM platform.
GEM platform.
Yeah. Maybe this is a transition phase that we need to get used to or that platform to become efficient. That's possible, it may happen. But I do think it slows one down. And I mean, I have many examples from my own research related purchases where the time scales have changed, and moreover the funding which comes to an institute, with this single treasury account, it gets depleted on March 31st. So if funding gets released in February, you can't really spend it realistically in 1 month's time frame. So this is where I feel if there is autonomy given to the institutions, it will be great. I admit that the reason government has taken certain steps is because there have been irregularities in variety of institutions, including the most premier ones. And there the blame is on the scientists or the administrators of such institutions. And there needs to be measures for accountability, but not by cutting down autonomy is my feeling. That's, I think, a single most important element administratively necessary right at the moment.
Now, recently in the budget, the finance minister announced and what seems like a very large number, which is a rupees 1 lakh crore corpus, essentially for pushing new frontiers of research and the like, and with an interest-free loan tenure for 50 years. As president of the academy, do you welcome the move and the announcement by the finance minister, Ms. Nirmala Sitharaman?
Absolutely. It's very exciting to hear this, but at the same time, I would be cautious by waiting for more details to become clear on how the funds are going to be available on the ground so that science and technology can benefit. So I would say it's a little too early to comment, but allow me to make another remark. If you look at Harvard University and their annual turnover is comparable to this amount. So for a country of our size, indeed it is a huge amount to commit by the government. But I won't get too sort of perturbed or disturbed by it. I mean, it is a very welcome change, addition to our existing funding structure. But government should realize that it's not such a large amount that the things will change overnight. Unless they bring in autonomy, transparency, and of course accountability, things won't improve.
Now, the current government and the new generation is focusing very heavily on entrepreneurship and on startups. Do you think in research and development there are enough startups? And if they are, then are they doing well, or what can be done to bolster them?
Yeah, I must admit that the government has done more than enough for startup companies and providing the ecosystem for them to grow. As it came up in the panel discussion today, I do think more is needed from the scientific community to be willing to make sacrifices and take risk in developing their startup company into a really successful venture. And that is not as happening as much either. So on the one hand, I feel government has actually overdone. They are promoting entrepreneurship as translation of fundamental or scientific research into real product excessively, in my view. And the fact that it's not happening as rapidly as one would like is partly because I think the other side of the
Now, the other things where the government has put in a lot of emphasis, and why we are talking more of government is because in India, fortunately or unfortunately, a bulk of the funding for science and technology and research and development comes from the government. Still, 70-80% of the money comes from the public, and the industry contributes so little. That's why we focus so heavily on what the government is doing. There are these very large semiconductor missions, the National Quantum Mission. Now, is the scientific community looking at these as positive steps and positive announcements by the establishment?
Um, Definitely, yes. I also think that these are very important strategic steps that the government is taking. But one input I can offer is the government needs to involve experts from India as well as they are doing from abroad in developing the policies and strategizing the flow of this funding into the most promising directions where the local scientists know where the gaps are, where the strengths are. And that I don't think is happening. And secondly, it needs to happen at a much more faster time scale. The funds are announced in time X, and then by the time it flows on the ground or into the labs, it takes more than a year or two. I think if science and technology landscape changes in 1 year or 2 years drastically, so that's where the actions have to be quick, and also involvement of experts is very important.
And do you think India can be a developed country without investing in science and technology?
No, impossible. It has to invest heavily into science and technology, and particularly if it needs to be developed in a real sense. The mass public has to be developed, not just a small set of people. I mean, capitalist approach, of course, trickles down to the lower economic stratum as well, but science and technology is what will make that happen, I feel. Not just growing the money and investments, giving returns, but also to flow those resources equitably to various parts of the society. I mean, science and technology have to work together with sociologists, economists, and other arts and humanities branches. I'm not saying science and technology have all the answers, but science and technology is an important instrument in sort of equalizing growth and reaching to the masses.
So are you excited about India and the Indian science and technology scenario, or you are looking at it as if it's flagging?
No, I'm quite optimistic, but I must say that the short-term anxiety that I felt about the Indian science and technology system is, I hope it is because of the way things are transitioning right now. And during the transition, as one knows, things are always uncertain and cause anxiety. So there are many indicators that government is keen to invest and do good things. The way it is happening needs to change. The autonomy, I pointed out, there are 2-3 factors for which I think I am very anxious. And autonomy is one of them. And the involvement of really good scientists who are willing to work hard for the system needs to be capitalized. The control cannot be from just one small set of people, I think.
Now, as we close, India has and the world has just come through the COVID-19 pandemic. And COVID-19 pandemic was one time where a lot of things had to happen within the country. And in my opinion, the Indian scientific community rose brilliantly and did a great job. But as the head of the Indian Academy of Sciences, what is your understanding? One, about the general management of the COVID 19 pandemic, and two, the role of Indian scientists and technologists in managing the whole COVID 19 pandemic.
Okay. So management of the COVID pandemic involves, of course, some biological sciences and other technologies to make sure that the technical solution reaches masses. But it also involved other socio-economic management factors. And I when it happened, I didn't feel so strongly that everything happened in a very sort of well thought manner. And that may be because there was a huge panic and the government had to take steps in a very short time. And for a country like ours, which is very complex with very different diversity in our culture as well as operations and lifestyles and finances, maybe that was as good as it could have been done. But I do think there was room to do it better. And but at the same time, I appreciate whatever government did, and I express one disappointment, but that's not specifically to do with COVID. The data and the accuracy of data about whether it's number of COVID cases, number of deaths, or any data related to that, we fared very poorly, I feel. But that's true of all data, Pallav, I feel. Even in a premier institute, if you go and ask a simple question, tell me in 2016 what percentage of students were girls or things, you won't get a very easy, reliable answer. And that's because management of data is very poor. And I think that's one area actually the government needs to invest in a very significant way. We are heavy into data science, IT, AI, but management of data is a very important factor in sort of growing our resources, in particularly this age. And that was taught to me during COVID time, I feel, the lesson.
And what about the contribution towards the vaccine, to diagnostics, to PPE kits, to masks? Because all of that, there was nothing coming from overseas.
Yes.
All the foreigners, all the Indians could not take a sabbatical in America and Europe. And so what is the feeling from the academy on the general scientific community having risen up to the occasion?
Absolutely, it was very good. And there was actually some corrective role the whole scientific society also played. If you remember, the government had announced release of vaccine on August 15th, 2020. And if you go scientifically follow the protocols for development of vaccine, it was just not possible because the testing in 3 phases requires a lot more time. And as you saw on the ground, vaccines came much later. So I think some subset of scientists played a remarkable role in this whole development. And remaining scientists, of course, were supportive and critical sometimes, but with a constructive sort of criticism.
So, going forward in the future, which fields do you think youngsters should be looking forward to, which could be giving better opportunities as India heads in towards being a developed country, especially in science and technology? It's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's a very loaded and hard question, I must say. I will go by the challenges our system is facing, and some of them, in fact, you mentioned too. Energy, environment, and clean water.
Clean air,
clean air, and possibly batteries, as you pointed out. So many of these areas require interdisciplinary approaches to tackle them. These are grand challenges which one discipline just cannot do it. So one is combination of chemistry, material science, physics, and engineering is a must. biology no one can overlook, particularly it's so directly relevant to all of these three areas, particularly health. So these are broad areas, but specifically if you ask, I think we need to look at the science, particularly electrochemical sciences, which are involved in management of energy, management of heat is another very important problem. Solar energy, as you know, is already cheaper than coal, even if you include the battery cost. So there, a lot of things have been accomplished already, but still we need our indigenous technology to be cost effective and also scalable. Maintenance is going to be very important as well. You know, when we phase out to renewable energy, I don't think we have everything in place to maintain them, recycle them. Recycling is another very important problem, which involves chemistry as well and chemical engineering. But again, these are sort of areas which are broad and they are really related to the areas of societal importance. I repeat that there needs to be commitment to also open-ended science in India, and youngsters need to be willing to take the risk to take up grand challenges in fundamental sciences as well. And see, the insecurity that people felt in 90s, like salaries were very low in India, that's no longer the case for scientists. You know, we have no longer an excuse to say our salaries are not enough, we cannot manage day-to-day things. So we should be even more willing now to take challenging problems. So, and they belong in areas ranging from gravitational waves. We are very short of manpower in gravitational waves. You know, government has committed thousands of crores, but I don't think there are enough people trained to make effective use of it. So youngsters should consider certainly there are opportunities, and not just that specific area, it will also train them for instrumentation and development of many peripheral technologies. So indeed, the science and technology has a strong future. This is a century of biology and some chemistry. So those areas certainly will be more valuable, but I think interdisciplinary approaches are going to be very important. And that's also highlighted in the national education policy. That
So you're bullish about India becoming a developed country as announced by 2047 or earlier. I'm very uneasy about 2047. I want a developed country before that.
I would also agree with you. Yes, and it can. See, I think it depends on a lot of factors, and it's not just India alone. It's a global. We are a citizen of the global world, and our development certainly depends on how the world develops as well. But I'm quite optimistic. I think by 2040, certainly we will be a developed country. My main worry would be that we still will have a large number of people at or below poverty line, and that is not some very good thing, and we should work in that, tackling that problem. Indian economy growing to very high, large scale, I have no doubts about. But more equitable distribution of our economy is what I worry about.
What a pleasure speaking to you, Professor Waghmare.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
And always a great way to end looking at the future, and that both of us want in India to be a developed country before 2047 is heartening, but we also want a country where there is equity and there is equality and there is a certain level of social upliftment for people. So thanks a lot. So that was Professor Umesh Waghmare, an engineer turned scientist and currently president of the Indian Academy of Sciences, one of India's most respected organizations among scientists, giving us a perspective on what his views are on the Anusandhan National Research Foundation and how India can become a developed country. The sooner, the better. But 2047 is a goal well achievable. In Chennai, Pallav Bagla.